So you're in the best of the best hands for the next 45 minutes to talk about a really important topic. New manager, no problem. What exactly does that mean? You are about to find out. And I am so happy to turn it over to Christine, our president.
Thanks, Erica. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you being here today. This is a lifelong journey of being a good manager and being a good leader. Just to think for a second of your vision, okay? So on your own piece of paper, you don't have to share this necessarily, but I think it's always good to start with the self, right? So what does success look like to you in this role of manager? Because I'm a very different person than you or you. So how does it look for you? How does it look for Donna? How does it look for Melvin? How does it look for Jerry Lynn? What does success look like for you? And just jot down some notes, a piece of paper that you have for just a couple of minutes. But often we forget about ourselves. Like what does it look like for me? All right. Does anybody have anything, if you want to, you don't have to share, but if you have something that came to you, a word, a phrase, an image, if you want to unmic yourself, you can unmute yourself rather, you can share that, or you can also just write something in the chat box. Sometimes it's interesting to hear if there's any alignment between your vision and somebody else's.
So success for me is success of the team. If the team succeeds, then I consider that a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And Donna, you're absolutely right on into where we're going. That's great. We're going to talk about that a lot today. It's also such, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'll say for me, success will mean that if I was not here, that the entity could still move forward. It would be like, I don't have to be present for everything to go well or go right. So that's what success looks like for me.
Frankie, I love it. It also takes a big burden off your shoulders once you let that thought in, right? Because you don't want to believe, and often people do, that it has to be, everything relies on their shoulders, right? Because you will be weighed down with that weight. And so it's a relief when you can let that go. And believe me, other people will think that's a relief for them as well, because especially as we're mentoring young people and so forth, they want more responsibilities. And so how do we see that by giving roles is not just taking it away from me, but actually building somebody else up? So thank you for that. Anybody else real quick? Okay, so that's you guys hit on something that we're going to talk about, which is this player to coach conundrum that I see come up over and over again. The best players rarely make the best coaches. As you get better and better at what you do, your ability to communicate your understanding or to help others learn that skill often gets worse and worse. And that's a professor of psychology looked at that, but it's something that's been studied a lot actually. And what we find in our work is that we take, and I see this across businesses, we work with not only at the leadership program where we develop almost everybody internally up through our process, but also we work with a lot of other, I coach a lot of other companies. And one of the things that not-for-profits, government agencies, social service agencies, you name it, I see it across the board. They take someone who's very good at their job, and then what happens? Promote them out of the work that they were actually good at and put them in a manager role because they need to grow for their career. But there's often very little to no training on those skills, which are very different often than the skills that got them there. In other words, they were a very good player. In some cases, I work with tech companies that were very good at creating code and creating products, and then they moved them to a management role. And tech people are generally not the best communicators with people as they are with code. So all of a sudden you see a real dramatic shift in those folks that are like, oh my God. And then you see huge turnover where they just hate those roles. And so what we try to look at is I try to prepare people, even in our own company, of saying, okay, you've been a great player. How do we then move you up to a great coach? And there's if you know anything if you follow sports, it rarely happens that you have someone who was a great player that makes a great coach. It's usually the okay players that make great coaches. And there's exactly this quote is that oftentimes someone who's really great, like Michael Jordan was in our day, or Wayne Gretzky or whoever, who's really great player, they don't always remember what it was like to not be great at something. And that's a very different skill. So the way I notice it in my organization is that somebody who we move up because they're very good at what they do. Maybe they're a great facilitator in the classroom. They work very well with young people, whatever. We move them up to manager. And then oftentimes we see the judgment comes out and they cannot believe that their peers who they were one of for years is so bad at so many things, right? And then they just get very frustrated very quickly. And we say, hold on, you were one of the best. So now you have to think about, how do you get that team, Donna said, how do you get that team successful, not just you successful anymore? So one of the things this is Steve Kerr, who's one of my favorite examples of a player turned coach. He was a pretty good player, right? He was side by side with Michael Jordan. But if you watch any of those Michael Jordan documentaries, wherever, Steve Kerr did not feel like a very good player, especially in comparison to Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan and what's his name? Anyway, the rebounder, I just forgot his name. But anyway, he did not feel like that. But what is an excellent coach, right? And one of the things he says is it's different as a coach because you're responsible for a lot of people. Even though you don't take a shot, you don't get a rebound, you feel like you just want people to succeed and you want to help them any way you can. And that is exactly Donna's philosophy. She is like the Steve Kerr of management today, or at least in our hopes, right? And the same thing that kind of Frankie's talking about. So it's really a mind shift. And the sooner you can get people, if it's many of you have been managing for a while. So sometimes it's about getting your new managers to make that mind shift. And I think it's helpful if you actually use these examples sometimes with them. And I usually say to them to start with this question for themselves. Am I just as committed to this person's success as I am to my own, or as I have been in the past to my own? And that's a big jump. And most people say, absolutely, of course I am. Of course I am. But I'm like, don't answer me. Just write the question down and think about it when it comes up. Because when you're so frustrated with that person for not getting their timesheets done on time, or messing up on this, or missing getting back to someone, we often I wouldn't have done it that way. Give it to me, I'll handle it. We take on that because we know that we can be successful. But how do I slow down and say, okay, how do I step back and help this person be successful? And that's hard to do. Like I said, you may just be someone that was a fantastic player, but if you want to be a good coach, leadership is a skill, not a trait. So it's not that you don't have it, you just need to practice it, just like you practice your rebounds and so forth. Just a quick little story. This is me on the left, believe it or not, like probably 16 years ago. And these are Erica next to me, who you saw, who introduced me, and Blanca and Anna, who I've worked with for over 20 years. I'm super lucky to work in an organization where I have grown up with a lot of folks since we were young. And I'll tell you that 16 years ago, I went from being their peers to being their boss. Okay. And I was fresh from maternity leave. I came back from having my first child, and our boss, like a week after I got back. And in that moment, I got promoted to their boss. So all of a sudden I was in charge of my peers. And I thought to myself, what many new managers think, I don't want to micromanage. These are strong, fierce, smart women. They're fine without me. They don't need me. They don't need me. I'm just going to be here for them if they need me, but they're fine. We can all just do what we do and everything will work itself out. And then they called me over very nicely and they said, hey, Christine, we'd love to take you to lunch. And I'm like, okay. We almost ate lunch together every day in the office, but all of a sudden they wanted to take me lunch. So immediately I had a feeling that something was wrong, or something. I was nervous, right? That feeling in the pit of your stomach. And we all sat down. There was a few minutes of just chitter chatter, and I could tell that they were nervous about something. And then I think it was on the far right. She said to me, hey, we have something that we want to talk to you about. I said, okay. And they said, and I'm nervous saying this right now. Isn't it funny? I feel very vulnerable. Again, you're immediately back there. And they said, we need you to step up. And I said, what? And they said, you're our leader. You've been put in this position. We can't do it because of our authority, right? We can all work together well, but we need you to step into your leadership and help us come together. And I was like, okay. And I said, but you guys are just as smart as me. You can do it. We've grown up here together. And they said, no, but you're in this position and we need you. You cannot be afraid of it. And I was literally, I got a little teary, as I do. And then I quickly wanted to get through lunch and absorb this on my own. And I went away that night and I couldn't stop repeating that thing in my head. We need you to step up. We need you. I couldn't stop. And what I learned in that moment is that I was afraid to go from being a player to a manager, especially because I respected these people so much and I was afraid of micromanaging them, afraid of all these things. So I actually wasn't doing anything. And so therefore wasn't really helping them. And when I heard that, then I realized, oh, I am in this position. I need to bring a bigger self to this process. And I still worked with them all to this day. And I am very thankful for that advice, probably some of the best advice I ever got in my entire life. And I thank them all the time when I tell the story for having the guts to be able to say that to me and for us to have that. Everybody has their own things of those people who are angels in their life, right? And devils, but those are angels. So the reality check, just so you guys, those of you who are data heads, like sometimes I can get into, Career Builder recently did a study that showed that 58% of managers said they didn't receive any management training. So if you feel, and probably most of your folks haven't either. And in some areas that number is even larger, right? 79% of people who quit their jobs though, cite lack of appreciation for the reason for leaving. People don't leave companies, they leave bosses. Those of you who work in the New York City Department of Education know that people who leave the DOE are not leaving the DOE, they're leaving their specific bosses. They're leaving in every single case, and they will tell you all about it. Good managers increase their direct reports effectiveness by about 34% is what they can see. So it's really worth it to invest in your own training, in the training of your staff, to look at this stuff. Leadership is a skill, not a trait, as we say all the time. According to Gallup, companies who increase their number of talented managers and double the rate of engaged employees on average 147% higher earnings per share than their competition. So even if you're in a for-profit, it really makes dollars and cents wise. And people don't care as much about the company they work for as they do for the team they are on. So within big companies, those small teams are really critical. And the people who manage each one of those teams, really important. And if you look at schools, it's the same way with schools and principals, right? It's really important to look at that sometimes rather than the whole. So what are fears that you hear either about being management from folks that you promote or from yourself? Like, where were some of those? Just, I told you the biggest one that I hear from new managers is, and you probably are saying it in your head right now as I'm saying it, is the fear of micromanaging. I hear it all the time. I'm not a micromanager. I don't want to be a micromanager. I hate a micromanager, right? So that's one of them. So same thing I had. And what we do sometimes in that relation to that fear is we do nothing. We don't manage at all. We don't lead at all. And so it's important to look at what are those fears coming up for you so you can decide. Does anybody have any? You can unmute or you can write it in the chat box if you like. Maybe fears that you've heard other people express too.
Fear of doing it incorrectly or fear of not stepping up to the plate.
Yeah.
Or quote unquote stepping up to the plate, doing those things I need to do.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So one of the things that I do is like when I give evaluations, I always ask questions about how can I help you to become better. So I always have that component to an evaluation that I add.
Yeah, Frankie, that's a great one. And such an easy thing to do, right? But makes all the difference in the world, because even people hearing that over, especially if you ask it over and over again, it makes a big difference. Lack of confidence, Donna, oh God, I know. Same thing. Why am I in this role? I don't know what I'm doing, when they don't want people to see that. So there's a fear of that too. It's also sometimes that we have a fear that we won't be creative anymore. Jerry Lynn, yeah.
I think that a lot of people feel that they're afraid to be challenged, like challenging people to do something that they might not really think they can do is actually the best management. I'm about to retire. I've been in education and teaching for 25 years. And my last principal for 10 years, this is the quote I sent her in her card every year for Christmas and the end of the year. A leader takes people where they want to go, but a great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but they ought to be. She has challenged me every year. She has said to me, Miss Unger, you're wonderful, you do this, that, but I really want you to go here. I want you to do this. I know it's scary. I know it's risky. You can do it. It will better your journey. And every year she made me do something that I didn't think I could do, and I did it. And I was most successful under her administration than any other principal in 25 years. She was amazing. So this quote is from Rosalind Carter. And every year when I give her a Christmas present and her end of the year present, I put this quote in the card, and we have this big chuckle and this big laugh. And I think if more administrators did that, challenge people and put them in a place of a little bit of discomfort, because they can see what you can do. They've been watching you. They've been observing you. You might not see yourself in that spot, and you will grow. You will grow. And if you make a mistake, like my kids say, mistakes are proof that you're trying.
Yes, thank you.
You can't lose either way.
Yes, thank you, Jerry Lynn. That's a great quote by Rosalind Carter, and so lovely that you share that with her and give her that feedback. Karima, I saw you had your hand raised.
That was a great quote. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not in a management position, but I thought this was a good training for me going into a position. So I'm claiming that in the name of Jesus that I will get something. And so I'm in the beginning stages. So I think this is helpful information. So I think I will struggle with, or maybe other people have struggled with, people not liking them. So how do you find the balance of being a good leader and not caring what people think, but also caring what people think? I don't even know the answer to that. I don't even know how to make that make sense. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that's a lifelong journey, to be honest with you. I think age has a lot to do with that. I think as I've grown up and as I've grown in my career, I care a lot less about what people think. And the interesting thing is, I think people like me more because of it. I think a lot of times I spent too many years trying to please. And what's interesting about that is that people really gravitate to authenticity. So the more that you are yourself, the more people actually really like you. The more you don't have an agenda underneath it, the more you are who you say you are. I think people more and more appreciate that, especially younger people today, and the way that the new kind of management and leadership, so you'll get there. And also, I'm just proud of you, Karima, for doing this, because what we find also is that at our company, we give management training to every single person from day one, because the idea is that you should start practicing this skill now, not the day after you get the job, but then you can get a running start. So really good on you for doing that. Right. Okay. I'm going to keep moving because I've got a lot to share with you. There's some biggest new manager mistakes also that happen, and we talk about them, right? We talked about some of them already, that the fear, the lack of confidence, all those things make you, in my case, made me not do anything, right? I didn't step up to the plate when I first started. I just thought it would handle itself. Jerry Lynn, in a way, shared what, with her good example, showed what the opposite could be, is if you just don't ever push someone, even your best producers, to do anything more or do anything different, that can be a big mistake also, right? There's a lot of other potential mistakes that will come up. Some of them is having a secret agenda. Some of them is, not being authentically you. Sometimes it's being cliquey with certain employees over others, and all of these things that can be different when you step into the role of manager. When you go from being everyone's friend, it's riddled with possible mistakes that you find along the way. What I'm going to do, what I love about webinars, especially 45-minute ones, is I'm going to try in the next 20 minutes or so that we have left to give you tons of information. Too much for you to take in. I want you to just write down some of those things that are stick with you today. Because the way the brain works is there'll be certain things based on who you are and your experience that will stick with you today. If you heard this talk next week, something different may stick. And if you're going to just come up with a few things that you're going to do, okay, at the end of today, and then one thing that you're going to start to practice. But get ready, because I'm about to take you on a huge storm of a ton of information that comes from the best of research that I have found over my 20 years of studying leadership, but also stuff that I've myself incorporated, some to better success than others. So if you do nothing else, I like to start with this. You do these 5 things, okay? So one is a mindset shift. So instead of, and I think it was Frankie that you talked about this, that fear of doing something wrong, that there's one right way. And if you're in education, you know about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset is there's a right way and a wrong way, and there's good and there's bad. And somehow we are never good enough. But if we shift our mindset into a growth mindset, which takes a ton of work in terms of how do I keep growing? How do I keep getting better, even though I'm still not there? How do I move beyond my comfort zone, expand my playbook, push myself, even if I don't have a boss like Jerry Lynn has to do that for me? Second thing is build relationships in any position. Karima, even in your position now, every relationship that you build, and this is what's fascinating about age and life that I think people tell you, but I don't think it matters when you don't realize it when you're young. Everyone that I built relationships when I was your age or young are now in positions of power. That's what's funny, is that you age up together. And then when they're in those positions of power, they're actually in positions to help you. So that's what's really interesting, is that everywhere you can build relationships, no matter where you are, if it's in the grocery store, if it's in your classrooms, if it's at your church, wherever it is, those relationships always help out. The people in toxic work environments that start to break down some of those, we don't talk to her, he's not in our group. The people that go past that are the ones that usually come up, right? If you keep yourself very small, if you stay within that toxic work environment, and trust me, it can be difficult to break out of it, but you have to keep whatever it is inside of you that keeps you going. The next thing is to take responsibility. And Donna talked about this before. Take responsibility for your team and their performance. So you own it, don't blame it. So no matter what, the worst thing you can do for your team to see you do is for you to say, that was those fools doing that, not me. Right? If your team sees you do that, you have lost all power and credibility for many years. So the better thing is if your team messes up, and even if you told them not to do it this way, for you to own it and say, okay, guys, we failed in this. I could be clearer next time with how I train you or how I communicate. You will earn and gain so much power, especially from your team, but also from your bosses and other teams, because people see that and they recognize that she's not shying away from that, or he's not a blamer. And then the other thing that's really important to keep in mind is grow the business and the people. So if you were especially if you're in a for-profit business, don't keep your mind off of the idea of growing your business, right? Because that is a career builder in itself. If you can get, even in a not-for-profit, if you can get more clients into your business and you can keep growing people, and you're seen as someone whose folks that you manage move up, you're seen then as very valuable. That is a very valuable skill to your career. And you should know that, because it will translate into money, right? Or should. And then strengths-based people development. So let them shine and push those results. So the sooner that you can see what lights up somebody at work, and you can, I always say to my folks, I can see Jerry Lynn's daughter works for me in full, and Megan, her daughter, is a really great program manager, does many things very well. However, one of her interesting things about her is that she's also an amazing singer, comedian, and performer. And so now, does she have to do that in her job? Absolutely not. But I would be a fool not to give her opportunities to do that, because when you see her do those things, she lights up the room and it makes everybody happier at work, including her. So what we're always looking for is like, what are different people's strengths that may not even seem like they're related to their job? And how can I use those a little bit? Donna, goodbye. Thank you for coming. We will email you the presentation. Tatiana will send this to you with the evaluation, and she'll send you all the information. So you don't have to worry about writing everything down for those of you who are staying. So if you do nothing else, just do those things. All right. How to step into leadership, creating your own management playbook. So what you want to start looking at, and this changes over years, right? I have notes and notes of things I want to do better as a manager and as a leader, right? So what we're going to really look at is you're going to be a same great performer. You're just going to do it with the new playbook is the way I like to look at it. So write down, like I said, 5 things for your coach playbook and commit to putting one into practice by the end of the next few minutes, right? As we go through this. Here we go. Is the first thing I want to say is, what was the behavior that a good manager you worked with exhibited? So on your paper, and a behavior or not a quality or a personality trait. So what's a behavior that a good manager you worked with exhibited? So not, oh, she was mean, but what was the actual behavior behind that that you saw? And just make a few notes of that. You don't have to share it, but those things are really important for us to see, because we emulate those. We say to ourselves, I want to be good like that person. It doesn't mean you're going to be that person, but it's nice to recognize good work no matter what. All right. And for lack of time, I'm going to find out some of these things that you wrote down any of these, but Gallup, who's a pretty big polling agency, finds that great managers motivate every employee to take action, engage employees with a compelling mission and vision, right? A lot of employees, especially young people today, need to be connected to purpose. In the old days, it was like you got a job and you were happy for that job and you did that job because that's what you did, but not anymore. Now it's really about how do you compel them to take action by explaining what is our bigger purpose, what is our bigger mission. So the more you can take time to make sure you understand that, the better manager they say that you'll be. And have the assertiveness to drive outcomes and the ability to overcome adversity and resistance. You're always going to have adversity and resistance. You're going to have a lot of assertiveness to drive those results, right? Because a very good leader really wants to make sure that they're driving results of folks beyond what people think they can do themselves and beyond even what you think you can do yourselves. And create a culture of clear accountability so that also if people are dropping the ball all the time, balls being dropped is normal, but are you figuring out ways that they can come back and go, okay, I need to do this? Because what happens is that if no one's doing what they say they're going to do, then your culture really starts to deteriorate quickly and nobody wants to work there. And build relationships that create trust, open dialogue, and full transparency, which we talked a little bit about. And make decisions based on productivity, not on politics. So what's the best for the group, not necessarily what's going to look the best or so forth. People really believe, especially nowadays, that is clearly important to stay away from that. Google also, because they have more money than God, Google did a project where they studied the behaviors of the best managers. It's called Project Oxygen. I seriously recommend reading it. I'll give you the link to it online. They also put out for free all the information that they use and the surveys and so forth, so you can use them in your organizations. But basically identify the top 10 there. One is that the person's a good coach, is looking at each person and helping coach them, empowers the team, does not micromanage. Tech people, like the people at Google, hate to be micromanaged probably more than any other group is what I have found. And so it was really important that for them to understand the difference, and they do a lot of trainings on how to empower versus micromanage. Creates an inclusive team, right? Showing concern for success and well-being and not just work, right? And especially if you are working in a difficult industry like education is these days, or social work or anything like that, you really have to think about people's well-being, caring for the caregiver. Is productive and results oriented, is a good communicator, listens and shares information, supports career development, and discusses performance. So it was really important. What they found too was that it wasn't enough just to do all these other things really well. You needed to be able to sit down with them and go, Karima, I think you're really great at this. I'm noticing this and this in your performance. And let's talk about what you think would be what you're interested in your future, and like having those discussions. And you can also say, look, I don't control all of this and I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe if you put it out in the universe, I can start to look at that and help coach you towards that direction. Has a clear strategy or vision for the team and talks about it. So I know it takes about 7 times, you've probably heard this, especially if you're in education, for people's minds to take in something. And so sometimes I have to, even though I think the vision is really clear to me, almost always people tell me that they are not as clear as I am on it. So I have to constantly find new ways to say that, sometimes written down, sometimes talking, sometimes up on the board in our office, whatever it is. Especially when we're remote, it's real easy for people to just be in their little zone, in their little box on Zoom, and lose that strategy. So it's more important than ever that I have regular team meetings to share that. And then obviously has technical skills to advise the team. That's helpful, right? It's not always a necessity, but it's absolutely helpful, especially in Google's situation as a tech agency. And sometimes they say that in education. Some of you are from education, and it's a lot easier to have teachers move themselves up to principal in terms of understanding the role of teacher, but that's not always the case, but it generally is helpful and collaborates across Google. So that's what I was saying too, Karima, the more you can collaborate across your different teams, the better that is for your career, but also it's better for your team because your team doesn't get into a silo. And then is a strong decision maker. Decision making is hands down one of the hardest skills to learn, and that's 10 webinars in itself on ways to get better as a decision maker. So I won't go into that too much. I will say that there's a book. This is a great book, B 2.0 by, it just came out. It's a new version. It's by Jim Collins and Bill Lazier. And he does a great thing on decision making. And if you're interested, I would highly recommend it. It also, there's an audio book to go along with it. And then if you really want something simpler than those two Gallup and Google things, is this book, The Effective Manager by Mark Horstman, which I'll send to you the link to in the PowerPoint. But one is, he just says, get to know your people. If you get to know your people and that's all you do, you're like more than halfway there. Most good managers don't even know if their people have kids, if they live in New York, sometimes it's just amazing how we don't know anything about our people. If you know what's going on with your people, and for instance, that Jerry Lynn just had a grandbaby, and then you're going to have a different way of talking with her and understanding the stresses and the excitement that's going on in her life right now, right? Second, communicate about performance. If you just at the very least are talking to them about how they're doing, giving them feedback. You would be surprised at how many people ignore their employees for the most part, especially now that it's very easy to ignore people on Zoom. And so it's important to constantly be asking, am I communicating enough about performance? And then he says the third one is to ask for more. Ask your employees for more. Don't just think, oh, they're fine. I don't want to bother them. They work so hard. I get this a lot from my senior executive staff. And I want to be like, yes, but I asked more of you all the time. And that's how you grew. And so it's like that bar that you're pushing up against in the gym, right? If you think of a big barbell, the more that you're pushing, it should be a little bit hard. It shouldn't be so easy to do those bench presses, right? It has to be a little bit hard for you to grow muscle. And then finally push work down, that you're taking some of the work that you have all the time and assessing what can I push down to other people so that I'm giving them opportunities to grow. One of the things that I'll hear a lot is that I had to learn that on my own. I had to pick myself up on my bootstraps and learn that myself. Why can't they? And I'm like, because you're doing all of the work for them. Give them things that they can do. And so where do you start? So just in the last minutes, here's a few other things that I think you can add to your list and look at later. But like we talked about with authenticity and cream of, be you. Just work on bringing your best self to work. So sometimes I try to be me. Sometimes I can be the snarky me. I can get into gossip too sometimes. That is not the best self. And when you're a manager, people look to you for that even stronger. So sometimes I have to be like, I can still be me. But if you guys could mute yourself, somebody's not muted and we're getting a lot of feedback, by the way. I could probably do it, but there we go. Thank you. So just think about how do I, and I've caught myself in some of those moments where I thought, okay, this isn't my best self. It may be part of me sometimes, but I can look at that. And the same thing of that self-awareness, be curious about your own behavior and start to really look at it. Am I acting in the best interest of this person? What is the best use of my time? And is there anything I'm doing that would give them an opportunity to grow if I let it go? The best use of my time, Eileen Fisher starts every day at her organization, the designer, with meditation every day. She starts with a 5-minute meditation. And before she goes in to run that meditation with her designers, she meditates herself and she asks herself, what is the best use of my time today? And then she writes down what it is instead of just the list that it's waiting for you to fulfill that you'll never fulfill. But sometimes you're in a position of power that can actually move things a little bit faster. So instead of just checking off things on a to-do list, think about what is my position to do that I can have more effect on, and maybe I should focus on that first. And then crafting a clear vision with goals and provide direction. So remember to connect the objectives and the project to the deeper kind of organizational why, and providing that context around decisions to folks. So what I find is that I know why we're doing something, but I'm not always good at telling people that work for me why they're doing that and repeating that. So I'm always, and I notice that especially with new managers, they're just so focused on being efficient that they're not always effective. So they want to have the results, they want to get everything done, but they don't always step back and say, you know what, Melvin, we're going to do this. I'd like you to work on this. This is why it's important to us to do it. And this is why I think you would be really good at getting this done. And boy, oh boy, do you have different results from Melvin when you tell him why specifically he is the perfect person to have this vision come true than if you just said, Melvin, you need to do this. So it's also a little bit about being part psychologist, right? And it should be true. It shouldn't be BS, right? It should be true. Here's many of this, we use it in a lot in our workshops. It's how do you go from comfort zone to growth zone? So think about that for your own emotional intelligence. It's interesting. We hire people for their hard skills. How well can they do this and this? But we almost always fire them for a problem with their soft skills. And by soft skills, things related to their emotional or social intelligence. Own your mistakes when you make them, reflect, push yourself past that comfort zone. Like you were saying before, Frankie, about stepping up to the plate is that idea of going into that fear zone, right? And it's only if you're in that fear zone, are you able to push through to that learning zone or that hopefully eventually that growth zone. And just in the last couple of minutes, consistently, regularly planned meetings. If you don't do anything today, if you're a new manager, set them up right from the go, both as a team and a one-on-one, especially on Zoom. You should be meeting with your direct reports every single week. And you can just say to them, look, I'm learning too. We need to meet every week, and especially on Zoom. Communicate with them about performance. Feedback's a gift. Recent studies show that 65% of people crave more feedback from their bosses. Strength-based feedback provides the biggest bang for your buck. You get 30 times more powerful to give them feedback based on something they're good at and how they could grow with that than to give them negative feedback. But if you have to give them anything, negative feedback's better than ignoring, okay? Help them fly, remove roadblocks, give them recognition. Jerry Lynn showed us that at the beginning, if you came early, to Erica. It's the #1 thing employees say their manager could give them to inspire them to produce great work. It is proven when it comes to inspiring people to be their best, nothing comes close to recognition, not even higher pay. And then appreciation can happen in two forms: listening to them and finding ways to let them know they're valued. Employees that are listened to by their managers report getting great feedback from those same managers. Turns out that listening translates to feedback and appreciation. So step into your leadership. Like I shared with you, my story is I want something that you learned today that you commit to putting into practice. And I know I just went through all those very quickly, but I want you to circle or highlight on your page one thing that you're going to commit to putting into practice today. I will send you these books and these links, and you can always sign up for more on our website. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see your faces, because I'd love for you to share one thing. Oh, I love HR spices. Oh, nice. Spice in the house. One thing that if you can unmute and share, it's one way that we get out of our comfort zone is we go to through our fear zone is by sharing some of those things. Karima, you had your hand up. Did I miss you before?
I am going to commit to reading those books. I just reserved them at the library, so I am going to commit to finding out more about great leaders.
That's great. Become a student, right, of leadership. Yeah. And I started working at this company called the Leadership Program when I was 24 or something. And the funny thing, 25, but the funny thing was I had no idea anything about leadership. I actually hated the word, hated leaders, hated all of that. And I had to learn, I had to study it. And there's nothing like studying it over time that converts you. Hey, Kimberly, I'm going to call on you. Do you have one thing you're going to commit to doing?
One thing I'm going to commit to doing is I do like performance check-in with the team that I work with, but it's not always every day. So making sure I am telling them like what they're doing good at and like some improvements too. And then also show that support and make sure I'm open with communication. So they're willing to ask me any questions they have.
That's great. And we like to use they've studied it and they say it's about 3 to 1. So 3 positive feedback to 1 kind of negative or constructive feedback that you have to give helps people hear you more. It's like a psychological thing. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it in one go, but it just helps you to know that if I'm regularly telling Jerry Lynn all the things that I appreciate about her performance, the one time I have to share with her something that I think, you could have done this a little bit differently, she's going to take that a lot differently than if all she ever hears from me is negative, right? We all have that experience of that boss who's done that to us. So that's great, Kimberly. Thank you. Does anybody else want to unmute and just share one thing you're going to do? If you have to go, I know it's 12:46. Feel free. We'll send this stuff to you. But if you want to stay on for just a minute more, I'd love to hear what your commitment is.
I'll speak just briefly. I'm the old guy here. Matter of fact, I spent about 31 years in professional sales and management. I'm since retired, do a lot of volunteer work and work with students on leadership skills. But It's interesting, and I did have to step away. I apologize for that. So if I'm repeating what has already been discussed, but one tool that I use, I call it SMART, S-M-A-R-T, when it's setting goals, which means it must be very specific, it must be measurable, it must be acceptable. And that is the key point there on both ends. That is on the person, the supervisor, or the person, that they understand and have clear goals and objectives, and there's buy-in on both ends. Because if it isn't, if it's only one way, then we don't know. Then of course, then we have acceptable, and then we have it must be realistic, very realistic. Because if we set goals, and if they're not buy-in, and if they're not obtainable, and we know that, then it just won't happen. And then lastly, the T stand for timely. It must be timely. And if you don't follow up on a consistent basis, whether you're going to meet weekly, quarterly to review what you have set out, then you'll find that meeting, it will fall by the wayside. So that's just one of the tidbits that I want to share today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melvin. SMART goals, very critical and such a good skill to learn. If you couldn't take in all that he said, you can look up SMART goals on the internet and get a lot of information too about that. Thank you so much. Audie, I see you are there. Are you still hanging in? Can you share one thing that you're going to do? You might not be there anymore. Okay. If anybody else, Frankie, or how about you?
Communication. And I try to tell people, and I have to remind myself that communication is not just talking, but it's also listening to, because you haven't communicated until you've listened to a person. So if you've talked to a person and given them feedback, You want to make sure you sit there and receive what it is they're saying back to you. So communication is, and we talk every day, but I want to be specific in like communicating things with them about the job and how they think they're doing, how they think I'm doing, and how we can make this better for the people that we're working for and working with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a good reminder of things. Oh, Tatiana Dominguez, who I am so lucky to work with, just put for you in the chat box a link to SMART goals, or setting smarter goals, as we say them, if you want to look that up. And Frankie, I totally agree with you. I think so often in my career in the beginning, I thought my job was to have a vision and then convince people of that vision. And so that meant a lot of talking, and I like to talk. But what I'm starting to learn as I get older is that actually I learned way more from that listening portion, and so much more of it has to do with that. Thank you, Audie. I saw that you wrote in the chat box. You're going to check with your team in one-on-ones more to give quick check-ins. Yeah, great. Christopher Burris, are you there?
Yeah.
Anything that you want to commit to doing?
Actually, I just got promoted, so I'm new to this role. I'm a youth development leader before and aftercare for AYS for CFI 27. I'm actually just listening and learning, taking everything in. I don't have a staff, so I'm a solo staff right now. So hopefully my enrollments go up and I will have at least a staff person. But I think when I start, check-ins is always just to see how they're doing, see what I can step in to help. That will be the one thing I will be doing.
Is
That's
this the
great.
Christopher Burris that used to work at Leadership?
No, it's
Yeah, congratulations. That's
Thank
exciting.
you.
And Tatiana will send you all this information, and I hope you join some of our other workshops as you grow and you put it out there in the universe, and you're going to get a staff. Trust me, starts to happen. Thank you guys all for joining it. Jerry Lynn, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before you go. And
I've just been given the gift of a collab this year that was unbelievable class, unbelievable teachers. And unfortunately, we were not able to really work together. Everyone was pulled in different directions with not being in the building and the hybrid. And then I took time off for Megan. And I'm just hoping that I can share this with them at some point on a lunch date, because I think we were such a great team that they would benefit from some of this being more consistent and being approachable. And I think that would help a lot. But
yeah. Great. Thanks so much. Thank you guys for coming. You really made this more interesting for me and dynamic. Tatiana will send you all this stuff, and hope to see you again at some of our